5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
How about we do it again?
6, 7, 4, 3, 2, 1. I think I fallen.
Okay, let's try one more
I
time.
definitely.
Ready?
I can review. Making review. Making review.
Say
6,
5.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
And then it was the 107th episode of Rank and Review. This is the second of a two-part quest to find what the best horror movies of the 70s are. My guest, Lee Beckmann, and I are going to be ranking our top 12 horror movies of the 70s, and we're going to be reviewing Magic, The Brood, and Brian De Palma's Carrie. Thank you so much for listening to Rank and Review. As usual, I will warn you that there will be coarse language and there will be spoilers. And as usual, I will tell you to send your feedback to ranknreview@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, you guys. I'm your host and random Canadian, Larry Parsons. Let's get into it.
Abracadabra, I sit on his knee. Presto, changeo, and now he is me. Hocus pocus, we take her to bed. Magic is free. We're dead.
Josephine Levine presents Magic, a terrifying love story starring Anthony Hopkins, Anne Margaret, and Burgess Meredith. Rated R.
So Richard Attenborough.
Yep.
Before he was, hammered into pop culture's psyches as the man who built Jurassic Park and Steven Spielberg's movie as an actor. He played Hammond in that movie. He made his bones as a very effective filmmaker.
Effective. I think he's an extremely accomplished filmmaker.
In between two of his more celebrated historical epics, that being A Bridge Too Far and Gandhi.
Yes, he did this before Gandhi.
Yeah, this is what I'm saying. This happened in between those two big epics.
Yeah.
Is this really out there psychological horror film called Magic?
Yeah. Starring
a young and very impressive Anthony Hopkins.
Yeah, he does. He's the biggest selling point of this movie.
I do think it's a good story, and I do think that the story does hold together. But if you didn't have somebody who was absolutely on point in the central performance, it would not fly.
Yeah, for the people at home who are probably too young to really sort of understand and respect how good Anthony Hopkins is, is still one of the best cinematic actors working today.
Yeah.
If you want to see why, one of the reasons why people say that, you need to check out Magic. This is young, hungry Anthony Hopkins.
I'm going to spend some time on the plot because this is one of those movies that I don't think a lot of people might have heard of.
Fair enough.
It was one of the ones, I had a memory of it, but I needed to rewatch to include in my 70s thing, and it ended up ranking fairly well in the list.
Yeah.
Anthony Hopkins is a magician, and his mentor / teacher is getting out of the game, retiring, and looks like on his last legs, dying. And just doing the card tricks, however well done, however effective, is not working. It's not getting any kind of notice or any kind of effect with the crowds. No matter how good his sleight of hand work is, no one gives a fuck.
Yeah.
So he has to come up with some way to sell his skill set.
Yeah.
So he brings in the ventriloquist angle, and he gets this dummy, Fats.
Yeah.
Now, I think ventriloquist dummies anywhere except for on the stage are just inherently creepy looking.
Yeah, there's something very scary about
when
this.
you got a guy doing a show on stage, it's all charming and lovely. But the second it goes in the back room or in the dressing room or in its little fucking coffin suitcase, that's a creepy little doll.
Yeah.
And the movie is really effective in employing that. Like, Fats is kind of funny and ribald and works blue on stage, and you can sort of get how he would be funny. But Anthony Hopkins never breaks dialogue with Fats.
Yeah.
He's always talking to Fats, whether they're on stage or whether they're not. And the movie, I mean, it's a performance thing. Like, yeah, he's talking to himself. He's filling it back and forth. But the longer it goes on and the darker things get, you start asking yourself, is this just Anthony Hopkins? Is he just mentally ill? He's really threatened by the idea of someone telling him that he's mentally ill. He doesn't want to take any kind of medical tests to get a Hollywood contract, right? So Fats sort of becomes the dominant, quote, personality.
Yeah.
And Fats has got a bit of a chip on his shoulder, and adversaries have a way of disappearing if Fats will, gets his will. And so we see this war that's, you could argue, just taking place in one sick person's mind. Or if you chose to, you could say that doll had some sort of supernatural property. The real gift of the movie is that it lets you decide.
Yeah, I've had the pleasure of being around children most of my professional career. So I've seen all kinds of kids. I've also seen, firsthand mental illness. And that's also gone heavily into my job. So to see the thought process of children, diagnosed or not, and how they deal with conflict or issues, just seeing the tragedy of a person with mental illness and how they make all the wrong decisions, how they go about it. I've seen that before. So to see that in Magic so brilliantly portrayed, I see this movie more as a tragedy than a full-out thriller. It's still brilliant, and it's still a horror movie, don't get me wrong. A lot of the classic great horror movies are tragedies as well.
Just that dummy's face makes it a fucking horror movie, right? Like, you could argue not one supernatural thing happens, and you could say, like, on the strictest level, this is just a straight thriller. But that dummy makes this a horror movie.
And the thing is that you like Corky. Like, you want this person to succeed. Like, even with that opening shot where he's telling that story and how it went at that club at the first time, and his mentor says, you just need to learn some charm, or whatever that line is.
You need charm. You need something to sell your skills. You have the skills, now you need the personality to back it.
He goes about it the wrong way, obviously. Corky
he puts the personality into the doll because he doesn't want to work blue. But he'll let the doll work blue. Right? And the doll will get all the laughs. And the doll gets all the laughs at his expense. He's constantly, putting Corky down. But I absolutely agree with you, is that I can identify with that performer anxiety. I have done enough shitty shows for enough shitty audiences. Where you're just like, I was so stressed about this last night. I was learning this sketch, wasn't sure if it was going to work, and I was worried to perform into crickets. And I may be performing to crickets, but it's not because the sketch sucks. It's because nobody gives a fuck that we're up here. It's some business convention that this entertainment was hired for, and they've been in meetings all day, and they just want to drink a beer and socialize. They don't give a shit that you're up there, right? And it's this lonely, desperate thing. He even has this outburst on stage. He says, like, this was 1,000 hours of my life to learn this trick. Pay attention to me, right? And that I can so relate to that feeling of like, I really take my art seriously, And I really take this podcast seriously, but not very many people listen to it, right? I really take my acting seriously, but I've been seen by, if I'm honest, maybe a few thousand people in my career. Right? Because that's the nature of live theater. So like, it's really easy to just feel small, and that what you're doing has no real purpose. And I really, really identified with Corky in that. And then being able to hide behind something, be it a costume effect, or in this case the dummy itself. Being able to throw that anxiety and blame it on someone else. It's the difference between doing an interview when I'm Larry Parsons and doing an interview when I'm playing a character like Clive or something. You'll ask questions that you would never ask yourself, right? You give yourself this lever to like just go farther than you would. And that's what this movie's dealing with, except for going farther than you would starts to involve homicide.
It's so tragic as well when the love story does kick in between him and Anne Margaret. That was another thing, because once again, you've got this very broken human being who clearly has some issues, but you see the goodness in him, and just the very warped way that romance sort of unravels in the story. You just know that no good is going to come of this for either of them.
He is talented and he is charming.
Yeah.
But his illness eclipses it.
Yeah.
And that's the tragedy, like you say, of the story. And Margaret slowly won me over. In the early scenes, I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
Like, her reaction to the dummy seemed so wrong to me.
Okay.
Like, she loves the dummy. She thinks it's amazing.
Yeah.
She's practically screaming like a child when she first meets Fats.
Yeah.
And to me, like, I would have gone maybe the complete other way with
okay,
it.
fair
Whereas,
enough.
like, she likes him, but she does find the fact that he has this ventriloquist dummy just a little, like, it's a little strange.
But at the same time, she recognizes both him and the doll because he's, been on TV before. So I don't think she would be as horrified once she realizes who this is. But anyways, we're picking at, very good choice. Yeah.
This is also set in the late 70s. It's like a very current movie when it was made. And it's funny, they mention Steve Martin in the movie, like, we're going to roll out your talent the same way we did Steve Martin.
Yeah.
Because at the time, Steve Martin was a stand-up comedian who was filling stadiums to do his banjo jokes and shit like this, right?
Yeah.
At the time, they thought that's just the way it was. They didn't even realize that this was this aberration that was Steve Martin.
Yeah.
It's just kind of interesting that plot point doesn't read anymore. At the time, it made complete sense.
Yeah.
But now to roll someone out like Steve Martin is just be like ridiculous. A ventriloquist act that you're gonna sell to like fucking Carnegie Hall? I don't know.
No. Yeah,
Right?
I know.
But in '78 that wasn't crazy, right?
Yeah.
Because you had Steve Martin with a fucking arrow through his head.
Playing a
banjo. So everything was on the table.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to talk about, to me, probably the most saddest scene in the movie, though. And it also speaks to how good this character actor is, and that's Burgess Meredith, who plays the manager. The scene that's both sad and somewhat scary, because it does eventually lead to his own death, is the scene where he asks Corky not to be Fats for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And even that whole scene where Hopkins says, I can't do it. He says that to him. And
he realizes just how sick Corky is.
Yeah. By
that point, he's too deep in the web.
Yeah, but all the people that he truly cares about, he just tragically kills because of...
He doesn't kill him. It's the doll.
Yeah.
Or is it the doll?
Anyways.
Obviously, the movie frames it as he's ill and that it's him. But for all those people out there that find dolls scary, you do have that option.
Yeah.
You do have the option.
Yeah.
Because there is a very noticeable time jump. Like, he's just a magician.
Yeah.
And then we jump.
And he's a celebrity.
A very good ventriloquist. And he's about to get his big ticket into Hollywood. Yeah. And so, presumably, we missed the time where he found the doll and, like, where he trained, where he lost himself.
Where he developed Fats,
He kind of lost his mentor, too, right? The magician that trained him is no more. So... It's such a fascinating movie, and like I say, another one a lot of people missed. William Goldman, he did based this off of his novel. I haven't read the novel, but it's one of the other reasons that I do respect William Goldman, in spite of the fact that
there was a time where he was pumping out.
Oh yeah, in spite of the fact that he wrote Dreamcatcher. I mean, he did write Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. He did write The Princess Bride. He did write Misery. We'll give him, we can give him that. But I've read a couple of his novels now. There's one, Edged Weapons, was made into like a Burt Reynolds movie or whatever. But it's interesting to me how talented he is because he understands the difference between a novel and a movie, right? Yeah. The Princess Bride, which he adapted, the screenplay is quite different, right? And same thing here. Like, I haven't read the book, but I was reading up on the movie. The psychological angle he could really dig into in the book, right? Here we just jump, and Corky has changed, and we have to fill in the blanks. What has happened with the change? Yeah, and the fact that not only is Corky or is his puppet sort of the star of his show, but it's the star of his life. Yeah,
it's one very strong aspect of his psyche. Mm-hmm. I just love the look on Meredith's face when he just realized, kid, I'm gonna go and help you. I'm gonna take you to a doctor. Like that. Just he knows that he has enabled. He's enabled it.
Exploited this guy, whether he really realized it or not. Yeah. You're an agent. You're making money off of someone else's talent. Like that. That's just a fact.
Yeah.
You might help him get the gigs, and you might help raise his level of fame.
Yeah.
But you're getting all of your green off of someone else's ability,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So on some level, he is using people, but
Yeah.
I don't think he fully understood. Like when he first signs the contract, or he's first talking about the contract, he says, please just promise me you won't go too crazy too quickly, because everybody's really nice until they make it, right?
Yeah.
There's that idea that celebrity can break you psychologically.
Yeah.
So I think that's where he's at.
Yeah.
That's where he's thinking, oh, the
But
fame
he
is
clearly
getting
cares
to him.
for Corky.
He does.
Yeah.
And that's what makes his death more tragic to us. It's
Yeah.
like, he does care for Corky, and he didn't realize until that moment that it was just an act. That on top of being incredibly talented, which he was, he's incredibly sick.
Yes.
And he just has that realization just a little bit late.
Yeah.
Just a little bit late.
Yeah, I know.
But he's such a, you got that really recognizable Burgess Meredith face, and he's more like a gentle, lighter, sort of almost comedic type of actor. To see that transition on his face and to see his tragedy fall in, it really works for the movie.
Yeah.
It helps if there's people that you care about who die, because it has more impact.
Yeah. I do also think the movie's best thrilling scene is what follows soon after, of him trying to swim to the middle of the lake and with the body and sink it. That to me was when I was like, yee! That's when the thriller elements really started to kick in for me. So there is some tense moments. Of course, the body washes up on shore, strategically, I might add.
Yeah.
But no, there's
something about the Fats voice too.
Yeah.
Now, that's another thing that I'd like to look into and understand. Either way, I think it's a fucking brilliant performance.
Yes.
But I get the feeling like Fat's voice was dubbed in after the fact. That a lot of the time he wasn't literally being a ventriloquist. He was playing a ventriloquist.
Okay.
But to me, like some people would say, do your due diligence. Adrian Brody did that Dummy movie, and he fucking learned how to be a ventriloquist.
Yeah, and Hopkins is not bad as a ventriloquist. I mean, you can see his lips moving a couple times.
I mean, that's deliberate, right?
Yeah.
He's good as he can be.
Yeah.
But I do think that secondary performance was plugged into the movie.
Okay.
Maybe I'm wrong, but there's something so powerful about Fats's voice and so meek about Corky, and how that switches just at the very end.
Yeah.
To kill Fats, he of course, spoilers, must kill himself.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And
as both of them are winding down, the conversation continues.
Yeah.
But Corky's taking point.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he takes control in the end, but
has to kill himself to do so, and that's really tragic. And of course, it's just to add even more punch is that even after all of what's gone on, Anne Margaret is still wanting to at least attempt at that relationship. Mm-hmm. That's how the movie ends. So that's how, like I get back to this
tragedy.
It's just very much a sad story. I was thrilled by elements of it, but it was one of those. It was like watching May in a lot of ways. I know they're completely different stories, but here's a person that is a very meekish.
This is a broken person who gets more broken.
Yeah,
as through the movie,
but is trying desperately to do good, and
we just want to be happy.
Yeah,
we just want to be happy as possible. He just wants to entertain people.
Yeah,
that's all he wants.
And I get that.
It's a good movie.
Yep. At number 12, I have the narratively confusing, but that's one of the reasons why I love it. And it's, I think, one of the classic definition of existential horror. And that is Nicholas Roeg's Don't Look Now. A very highly controversial movie. Once again, its terror kind of slowly creeps on you. I love, and once again, the 70s, they love the ESP. They love the psychic storyline, if you will. The very challenging Don't Look Now with a great Don Bluth and also
fucking rock,
Julie Christie once again.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's really good. Yeah.
It's funny, we're close on that. For me, number 12 is Taxi Driver, which we just talked about, so I'm not going to like really blow through too much. But Travis Bickle is a villain, a super villain, a dangerous motherfucker. And this is like the origin story of a dangerous motherfucker. And when the credits roll, he's still out there ticking away. Yeah. You could get into his cab. Yeah. And one day he's going to kill more people. Yeah. He is going to kill more people. Yeah. That is inevitable. Yeah. And it's a fascinating, dark, classic Scorsese piece. So number 12, Taxi Driver.
So at number 11, it's my Canadian boy, my boy. And once again, I think the ideas presented to me in this movie are very intelligent. And good horror is about something more, like something else, something deeper. Yeah. I think this is an example of this, and that is David Cronenberg's The Brood. We are going to talk about this movie. This movie, the more I see it, the more terrifying it is. Especially, as a parent, I think it's definitely affected me. But I just love The Brood. Nice. Yes, The Brood.
We're going to review that, so we'll get deeper into it. My number 11th, you just mentioned it too. It's funny how close both Taxi Driver and Don't Look Now have meshed together. Yeah. The other interesting thing about Don't Look Now is that it's another one of these British independently produced horror movies made by a British filmmaker, and both it and The Wicker Man, they didn't know what to do with. The studios didn't like them, so they paired them together. And instead of releasing them wide, they toured as a little twosome. Two of the best horror movies of the 70s you could watch as a double feature: The Wicker Man and Don't Look Now. And what would your head be like when you walked out of the fucking theater after those two movies? But I agree with everything you said about Don't Look Now. It's all over the place. It's got that weird controversial sex scene at the beginning, which is like Donald Sutherland having sex and with his wife being juxtaposed with them just doing humdrum, boring things and just not feeling anything. So it's like with this intense sort of sex juxtaposed against this really boring, depressed, grief, because they're...
It is a meditation on grief.
Yeah. It's one of these movies that's all set on the precipice of a horrible, horrible tragedy. Yeah. So, the always memorable Don't Look Now ranks at 11 for me.
At number 10, and this is where you could argue that this is not a true horror film, but I will make a case, and in some ways you're right. It's definitely the most, I think, polarizing pick. But once again, here's another example of what I would call the very definition of existential horror, where this movie is about an environment that is very nihilistic in nature. You could even argue that fate is the monster here in this movie. It's very dark and pessimistic, and it's not the first William Friedkin film on this list. But at number 10 is Sorcerer. There's been two movies this year that made me, and I've already talked about this, where I just was literally grabbing the couch that I was sitting in and just gripping my fist and screaming at the movie. And that's when I realized how into it I was. And that was obviously Train to Busan, which you showed me. But Sorcerer is the second one. It's based off the novel Wages of Fear, just to give you a sort of a heads up.
But it's more of like a sort of an international thriller, by description anyway. Yeah. But you're just saying it's so intense that it almost qualifies?
Well, I was screaming and going, he's gonna die, aren't you, kind of thing. Right. But also because the environment is such a monster in a lot of ways. And also, like I said, fate is this almost looming presence with this movie. And the ending of it is very, very dark as well. Basically, it's about four not good human beings. These are not good men. An Italian hitman, a Palestinian terrorist, a French banker who defrauds France's Wall Street, and then leaves both his best friend, who kills himself right in front of him, and his wife to sort of take all the flack as he flees. And of course, my boy Roy Scheider, Captain Brody, who is this mobster getaway driver for this group, and they go and rob this church that is actually a front for this rival gang that they're fighting with, and a priest is killed in the robbery, and then they're escaping. Of course, all of Brooklyn's looking for them for what they've done, and he crashes the car. They end up in sort of a squalor in South America, which its main bread and butter is this oil rig, which very soon explodes and catches fire. And not only is the oil company losing millions of dollars per minute, but the whole town, if it's not stopped, will burn. So these 4 men who are not good men get together and reconstruct 2 very not well put together trucks, and they're told there's highly unstable nitroglycerin they put in the back of these 2 trucks, and then go up the mountain and battle all kinds of things, from warring tribes to each other, to, without a doubt, there's a sequence that puts the Temple of Doombridge to shame.
So you like this movie? Okay.
I don't want to talk anymore. Anyways, William Friedkin's Sorcerer.
All right. Again, my only my memory is that it's a really good movie. It's been a long time since I've seen it.
Yeah.
I don't. It might be on my list of some of the best movies of the 70s. I just don't know if it'd be one of the best horror movies of the 70s.
Well, it's very tense. It's very tense, and I'm just like, ah.
And look, you've called me shenanigans on some of the things I've selected in the past, so I'm not going to wag my finger too hard. Yeah. And 10th one is a weird one for me because I have a love-hate relationship with it, but I can't deny that it needs to be discussed on this list, and that's Tobe Hooper's Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Not on my list.
Yeah, well, a lot of people feel that way. I get that it's an experiential horror movie, and that it's shrill, and that it's like piercing and but it leaves its mark on you. I think that I feel about this movie the way you felt about Cannibal Holocaust.
Yeah.
Is that it made me feel unclean, like it made me feel gross for having watched it.
Yeah.
I still am skeptical of like how much of this was skill and how much of it was luck as far as how they achieved it, but it definitely, it's a tough movie. It's not as violent as its reputation is, but it is every bit as intense and horrific as its reputation says. It's influential. It feels found footage. It feels like it should be mentioned in the same breath as Cannibal Holocaust or Blair Witch or something like that, but it's not found footage. It's just the presentation of it is so raw that it feels authentic sometimes.
I went back and forth because originally Texas Chainsaw was on this list, and then I took it off, and I've rewatched it, and my esteem for it has grown. Like, I would like to actually have it in my collection. Sorry, horror fans, I don't have it because I used to not. I was so disappointed by it. It's a very terrifying movie, and the last 45 minutes of it they're raw and primal.
It's a hard watch.
It's a hard watch. I know for a fact that when Hooper was making it, he was thinking that, because it was such a low budget, that they were trying to go for a PG. And although I think there's lots of skill involved with Hooper, he pulled back a little bit. They could have showed us more. Like, this is the decade of The Exorcist.
That's the fascinating thing about Texas Chainsaw Massacre, is everyone talks about how fucking brutal it is.
It's not.
It's not that viscerally violent. I'm not going to say that there's
a lot of the violence actually happens off camera.
It's nowhere near what people think it is. It's the screaming and the presentation and the madness that causes the horror. It's not the chainsaw.
I will give credit where credit is due. Our lead female character actor, she fucking brings it. Like, she is amazing in it. It was hard for me to leave Texas Chainsaw off this list. I will say that.
Well, it was hard for me to put it as high as 10th, but I just think that it is an influential movie, and it had to be a part of the discussion. It's not a movie that I return to a lot because I find it unpleasant. But it's a fucking horror movie. So here it is. What's your number 9?
Number 9, I probably have number 8 and 9 are just lots of fun. And this movie makes me giddy and smile, and it is obviously a Jaws ripoff, and I do think it's Joe Dante's finest hour, and that is Piranha.
Yes,
Piranha.
Put it in the top
Piranha. 10. Oh, I love this movie. It's the killer fish. I just love the fact that our lead character is fucking shit-faced the entire movie. This movie makes me smile from I smile from ear to ear, and I love this movie to no end, and that's Joe Dante's Piranha. I'm so disappointed that we're not talking about this movie, because I know you've reviewed it before, but Piranha's so much fun.
It's a fun movie. I'm not really fighting you on it. It's on my list.
It's my highest guilty pleasure, I will say that.
Well, I got some guilty pleasures that I'm about to talk about here, too.
Okay.
Number 9 is A Vampire Tie.
Okay.
One of them's intensely personal, and one of them you've already mentioned.
Okay.
Tobe Hooper.
Yeah.
Surprise, surprise. As much as I talk shit about it, he has 2 movies on the top 10 horror movies of the 70s.
Yeah.
I think his Salem's Lot is fairly strong. I think there's some really scary stuff that works on television. I'm not sure why they made the changes they did to the novel, but nothing breaks the movie. Nothing makes the movie not work.
Yeah.
So, I'm going to mention Salem's Lot. This one's personal to me, but the Frank Langella version of Dracula.
Oh, okay.
There's a scene in that movie, and again, it just goes back to me seeing it too young.
Yeah.
Where this man has to stake his daughter.
Yeah, there's the character of Lucy. That's a creepy scene.
And it's always stayed with me.
Yeah.
And for some reason, I just wanted to include it here.
Yeah.
I'm letting it share a space with this, but Dracula and Salem's Lot.
Okay. Number 8.
Just wonder what the fuck that sound is. It's like a moth or something.
Yeah. At number 8, I have the batshit insane crazy. And this is I'm going to try and say this correctly. Nobuko Obayashi. It's a Japanese horror film called House. You have to even say it like that. Almost a good decade before Sam Raimi decided to do this insane, crazy Evil Dead movie. This apparently very famous Toho film director who did a lot of commercials did this off-the-wall story about this young girl who finds out that his father is dating again and remarry, and that this sort of kind of weird, creepy woman, and in doing so writes a letter to her mother's sister, her auntie, who she hasn't seen in almost 10 years, especially after the death of her mother. Her and her friends go to this auntie's house, and right off the bat, there's something very wrong. But even if you can get past the first 30 some minutes, because it almost works as a sort of Hello Kitty melodrama cartoon, but there's something just a little bit off about it, and then it gets to the house, and the visual imagination in this movie is outstanding. This is pre-CGI.
The filmmaking and the imagination I agree with, but I think that it's more mad than anything else.
Yeah.
And maybe that's what people love about it. I considered it for the list. I didn't put it on the list.
Yeah.
I found some of it so absurd that it made me laugh.
Yeah. No, you laughed at this movie. Like, it's... I found it more terrifying in the last couple of minutes, but it's so insane. Like, just the visual imagination to this movie is just off the charts in a lot of ways.
I find this with me in a lot of Asian cinema.
Yeah.
It seems to be like they like having really dramatic tone shifts in their movies. Yeah. And for me, I find it uncomfortable. I don't know why. Some movies can pull it off. It has been done successfully, but this
movie's not for everyone. I freely admit that. And it's not that I, was grasping the straws, but I'd never seen a movie. Well, I'd seen Evil Dead before this, but I can imagine like people seeing this for the first time, and you're seeing a movie kind of ahead of its time.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways. So I'm putting House on there.
Okay. I have another tiresome tie in 8th place.
Yeah.
There are 2 films directed by Bob Clark.
Okay.
One is called Black Christmas and one is called Death Dream.
Yeah.
He made them back to back in 74 and 76, I want to say.
Yeah.
You look at them now and they are throwback works. Death Dream is about a guy who comes back from Vietnam, a corpse, but gets up and goes and visits his parents. Yeah. And it's a not so subtle allegory on how war changes people, right? Yeah. And how it affects the family and spills over to the rest of society. And it's not subtle, but it was one of the first of its kind in that regard. And it also has makeup effects by a young and hungry Tom Savini.
Yep.
So I think it's worth a look for that. And Black Christmas is the slasher movie template. It beats Halloween out the gate.
Yep.
It beats Friday the 13th out of the gate.
Yep.
The point of view perspective kills. The fact that the movie ends unresolved with the killer running free.
Yep.
I think that Bob Clark made 2 quietly incredibly influential horror movies, and I don't think they get enough speak, so they may rank a little bit artificially high by sharing 8th position, but I wanted to mention them.
Fair enough. At number 7, I have one of Wes Craven's finest hour. A lot of love is given to Nightmare on Elm Street, and I do love that movie but I do think this movie is a lot better, and that is The Hills Have Eyes. This movie is an endurance test. I think we've talked about this movie.
We reviewed this movie together.
This movie is an endurance test, And once again, all the performers in this movie, both from the villains and to our victims' heroes, are so good. You really want to hate these mountain folks. You really do hate them. And so when the tide does finally turn, you're just like, fucking yeah! Like, you go, dog!
Yeah.
So,
well, congratulations for the first time on this list so far.
Yeah.
We share a placement on the list.
Yeah.
Because The Hills Have Eyes is also my 7th place. Yeah. And for me, that movie, I mean, it was good. I was liking it. The suspense was good. The characters were working for me. But it's the assault on the trailer.
Oh my god.
It's the assault on the trailer where, things don't go a little wrong. Things just go off the fucking cliff entirely. Yeah. A woman fights to the death for her baby and fucking loses.
I know.
It's unbelievable to watch. It has that component of a horror movie where you cannot literally believe what you're seeing. Yeah. This evil must be punished.
Yeah. They can.
So,
God's gonna sit this one out kind of thing.
So, you can tell by our reactions, it gets under your skin. Yeah. It's a tough fucking horror movie. And I agree, it's not for everybody, but Lee and I both put it at number 7 of the best horror movies.
I can't believe it's number 7. That's one of the things. It's just but there's so many better ones.
So,
They come from the unknown, and they're here now, hiding, waiting to strike. You can feel their presence all around you. Never before have you come this close to the edge of terror. Never before have you faced anything so strange and sinister, so bizarre and unnerving. Never until now. David Cronenberg's The Brood.
Are you ready for me, Frank? I seem to be a very special person now. I'm in the middle of a strange adventure.
I want to go with you wherever you go.
Do you?
Yes.
Then look!
The Brood. You can run. You can hide and hope they won't find you. But you won't escape. Once unleashed, The Brood will destroy anyone who gets in their way. David Cronenberg's ultimate experience in inner terror, starring Oliver Reed and Samantha Eggar. The Brood. They're waiting for you.
So I backed into my love of David Cronenberg. I always want to support Canadian talent, and when I was first finding my way into film, it was probably the early 90s, which is when Cronenberg was releasing some of his most Cronenbergian films. Yep. Crash and M. Butterfly, and some of his less accessible works, to my opinion.
Existence.
Yeah. So I wanted to like Cronenberg, but I've always sort of weirdly liked, in a way, some of his more commercial ventures, like The Fly and The Dead Zone.
Yeah.
So when we come to The Brood, which I didn't see as a kid, or if I did, I don't remember watching it. It felt to me when I was watching it like this is the movie that should have made Cronenberg. It was his next film, Scanners, that I think really sort of made him pop big and got him some, high-paying jobs in Hollywood. But The Brood is a fully formed piece of Cronenberg. Other than maybe some kinky sex, because it doesn't really have any kinky sex.
There is actually no sex. Up until this point, it's probably his coldest movie, but I think it's also one of his most personal ones.
And so it has to do with his divorce.
Yes.
And basically, I felt the themes of, parental, not necessarily neglect.
It's the sins of the mother, the sins of the family is definitely a thing that's...
The fear that the parent has that they're going to wreck their kid.
Yeah.
They're gonna fuck up their kid.
Yeah.
Despite their best
I think
intentions.
every parent has that thought, though. It's a horrifying thought.
Well, and that's why it makes good sort of fodder for a horror movie.
Yeah.
The movie sort of split between following this high-profile psychiatrist who's got this innovative new program of way to reach people.
What's the name of it? I actually have it here. It's played by Oliver Reed, by the way.
Hal Reagan is the name of the doctor, and it's weird. It's part of the 70s era stuff. We're going to talk about it in some of the other movies.
Once again, that love of psychology.
Yeah.
Psychoplasmics is the name of the program that he's using.
But he's also sort of like a pseudo Dr. Oz, Dr. Phil, almost celebrity type of doctor.
Yes. He's dealing with heavily traumatized people.
And he does his work in front of live auditoriums of people.
He gives lectures, yeah. And he's got a god complex. He's Victor Frankenstein in a lot of ways.
Then we also have this couple that are on the outs that...
yes, Frank and Nora.
Yeah, and...
Canadian boy Art Hindle, and also Samantha Eggers, who's a fairly good British actor. Thespian, I should say.
Yeah. They have... She's got a lot of issues. She's going to be seeing this psychiatrist to help see if we can sort this mess out.
Yeah.
But their daughter is caught in the tug of war in the in-between.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden monstrous children start manifesting and killing folk.
Yeah.
So that's basically the field that we're playing in. What do these two storylines have to do with each other, and where do these evil dwarf children things fit into the mix?
Yeah.
And I think it's as solid as a rock horror movie still today.
Better than solid, actually.
You can tell it's a low-budget movie made in Toronto in the mid-70s.
Yeah.
But if you can forgive the aesthetic, which I don't think is something you can really hold against a movie, I don't think anybody who's a fan of the horror genre will feel their time is wasted.
Yeah, no. You mentioned how it's a bitterly cold movie, and it is both stories wise and in aesthetics. Cronenberg up until this point had been using bright yellows and reds with Shivers and Rabid, and here you've got a lot of cold brown, red, and blues. It's definitely a fall aesthetic that I can identify with here. You know, seeing all those kind of leaves on the ground, and also just the crispness of that Canadian air. There's something that's unmistakable when you shoot in Canada.
Yeah.
So that's there, and I remember like a lot of the reviews when this movie first came out, and I can definitely understand they called it very chauvinistic. Like that was one of the criticisms that this movie had, and I can totally see that.
I can totally see that.
It's also I also discovered like when Cronenberg talks about shooting the end scene. I don't want to spoil it too much, but when spoilers, the Frank character finally strangles Nora. Cronenberg talks about shooting that scene, and it's called it extremely satisfying. Yeah. And I'm just like, ooh.
Well, he created a fictional story in which, the woman who represents his ex-wife, for a plot point, needed some strangling. Yeah. If we're going to say it, we're going to say it. If we're spoiling any of these movies for you, I apologize. But I do put a spoiler warning at the top of every episode. Yeah. She has this sort of artificial womb from which she can...
her uterus is on the outside, is essentially what it is.
She can manifest these children out of it, and whatever she's
it's the big shock reveal.
Yeah, whenever she's angry at someone, whatever rage she feels,
she gives birth to one
she
of these...
projects outwards. It turns into one of these evil little gremlin creature kids, and it goes out and sort of tries to extinguish the source of the rage. Yeah. So that's where the little kids are coming from. Yeah. So the psychiatrist is indeed sort of a mad doctor. Yeah. I don't know that we can say that we like Oliver Reed. And
no. In fact, I think he's honestly the real villain of the piece, because we're also meant to assume that he's known about this for a while. Yeah. Yes.
Well, he would have to have.
Yeah.
And Art Hindle might be definitely a dude stuck in the mindset of the 70s, which still, the way he speaks to women and the way he's prone towards violence and not questioning it. I think that's sort of some of the bitterness that comes with just the period that the movie came out of. Yeah. But I think it's a ballsy sort of horror movie, and it's the most purely Cronenberg one I can see. Like, both Shivers and Rabid feel like Cronenberg riffing on Romero to a certain degree. Okay. It still has his own sort of kinky, gross angles to them. Okay. But Brood is pure Cronenberg.
Yeah, I know. His infatuation with body horror,
Right.
like he really gets under the skin. I like the whole thing, and he talks about this where when people experience really like severe emotional trauma, say like a divorce,
Right.
then the body then has been known to react in certain ways to deal with the pain of that grief.
Yeah.
I've even sort of oddly experienced, like I've had huge rashes after kind
Traumatic
of
events.
So that kind of struck a chord as well, and that is explored obviously to in umpteenth degree.
Well,
but
and as we progress through Cronenberg's film, like Videodrome, there's that really disturbing dream sequence in Dead Ringers, like
Yeah.
where there's a very physical body horror stuff.
Yeah.
Naked Lunch, holy shit, right?
yeah, oh yeah,
Cronenberg is definitely into this uncomfortable zone, but
Yeah.
this is the first time he fully got into the bath with that as far as his films.
yeah,
The other thing I want to say about The Brood is the violence in the movie. Considering it has violence on and delivered by and on children,
yeah.
he doesn't flinch from it.
No,
It's got that really bright red Kool-Aid blood that you tend to see in 70s movies.
yeah, but it's still
But like a grandmother gets bludgeoned to death with
yeah.
like a meat tenderizer.
Well, the father gets beaten to death, if
Yeah.
I'm not mistaken, as well, and that's that's pretty
Brutal.
awful.
It's brutal. It's,
Yeah.
it's ugly. And like you said, or it could have been done the other ways, where we're looking from
Yeah.
the point of view of him, and we're seeing the hammers swing down, but we're not seeing the violence. Or you
Yeah.
know, there were ways to get around it, but there was a conscious choice to not get around it.
Yeah.
We're going to make you uncomfortable with this.
Yeah.
You're not going to feel safe while you're watching this movie, and none of the characters are going to feel safe
Yeah.
while you're watching this movie.
No, the other thing I really liked about this is that I see Nora as more of a tragic character anyways. She only, like, if you watch closely the end scene once again, where she doesn't realize, I mean, she knows
She's a guinea
been,
pig.
She's been giving birth and she's been a guinea pig, like she's been manipulated and essentially like kept in seclusion by this doctor to begin with and turned into a monster. But if you watch, she's unaware that her brood have actually gone and killed people.
Right.
She's given birth. She doesn't know that she, as in essence, is a murderer.
Right.
So to that kind of, you just see that look in her face that by Eggers at that one point. It's really, really good. But the other thing is that who's the first person to die in that movie? It's the grandmother,
Yeah,
right?
believe the
You know,
grandmother.
of course, when it's revealed, early on as well that she has abused.
The cycle of abuse.
Yeah, like that's
reason-
where it's really all started.
The reason Nola's getting psychiatry is because she's been accused of abusing her daughter.
Yeah.
Right? So, and her mother abused her. So this
Yeah.
is a cycle abuse thing. This is what the father is trying to protect her from, which is why
Yeah.
he is positioned in a heroic place, even
Yeah.
though he doesn't behave very heroically, arguably.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah,
I also am not entirely unsympathetic to the rage of like the Papa Bear rage.
Yeah.
You know?
yeah,
Like if it has to do with my kids being in danger, I might not be reasonable
Yeah.
about it.
yeah.
Like-
I can get that. Yeah.
So I think it taps into that as well. I feel like I've downplayed the fact that it is actually a genuinely creepy movie.
It is. No,
I think that it might be the creepiest movie that Cronenberg made. I mean, The Fly is more viscerally, violently scary, and like the Dead Zone.
But it's almost a Greek tragedy in some ways.
Yeah.
It's a tragic love story.
Yeah, well, same thing with Dead Zone in
Yeah.
a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And it sort of walks that wire line between thriller and horror movie. I think that, yeah, this is the Cronenberg's most authentic and original scary
Horror film. Okay, I can buy that. Yeah.
I mean, he's done lots of other movies, but he has kind of abandoned the horror genre for the last while.
I think absolutely.
And, I would love it if he was to return.
Yeah.
Another thing occurred to me while I was watching The Brood. This is maybe slightly off topic, but I'm just wondering to get your thoughts on it.
Okay.
Cronenberg movies haven't been remade, typically, have they?
Well, there'd be very difficult to do a lot of them, like because they're so personal.
But I can see someone taking a stab at Scanners, right?
Yeah, I can see that.
see someone taking a stab at Shivers.
Okay.
The Brood is something that is so Cronenberg. I think that, like, you probably couldn't do it, right?
Well, you wouldn't do it well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, yes, please, Cronenberg, return to the horror genre.
Yeah.
There's usually an element of ick or a horror undercurrent to his films, but
Yeah.
as much as I've really enjoyed, some of his more recent things like The History of Violence and things like that, I miss horror Cronenberg.
Yeah. There's so many reasons why I think this movie is a classic to me, because I think there's a lot of levels to this movie. I mean, on one level, you've got this sort of schlocky plot of, monstrous children horde, zombie horde, if you will, go on murdering people, but the attention that they get to the traumatic relationships. Cronenberg loves his tragedies a whole lot with horror films, and this is another one. Like, this is a family basically is breaking apart and is splintered into something monstrous.
That's what the movie's about. It's about the destruction of the family, and how, although it is aided by a mad doctor, it is largely self-destructing. Yes,
a lot of them are. But it's also about a very dangerous relationship between mother and their children, which is also explored in The Babadook. I kind of see those as a good double feature, where you've got mothers who are
resentful,
monstrous, and homicidal beings, and they're both, I don't know, they both let me emotionally, psychologically horrified at the ideas presented in this film.
There's the sort of evil flip side to the coin of parenting, and happily it doesn't seem to happen often, but it does seem to happen where most people have a kid and they realize that they're just willing to do what it takes, to put whatever it takes into the raising of this child. But there's that small percentage that sort of views it as, this child is going to take from me. It's not about giving to this child, it's about this child taking from me. Right? And that usually breeds poisonous environments.
It does.
It's interesting that even though it is about, set on the backdrop of a pretty bitter divorce too, that I don't think he's entirely unfair to the Nola character. Like, she's mad and she's trying to get help, and she goes to the wrong fucking person for help, and he makes things worse. So, like, I don't feel like he's vilifying her necessarily.
No, only at the end does she, I think, become a villain, but
But she's kind of lost her mind by that point, right? She's been driven to a place. So, like, I appreciate that, because it could have really earned its reputation as, chauvinistic, not
schlocky.
And it's not that. It rides that line, and it makes you worry that it's going to go there.
No, absolutely.
Fun fact: Oliver Reed was arrested during the production of this movie.
Yes, I've read that.
And apparently he bet someone he could walk a few blocks from one bar to the hotel that they were staying at.
Completely stark naked.
And somebody called the cops on him.
I know.
So he'll always remember that one chilly night in Toronto. Again, like, I've got some limited experience with the police officers, but I like to think they get him in the back of the car as quickly as possible.
And then they soon realize, hey, shit, you're Oliver Reed, and apparently was just cracking them up at the police station when Cronenberg was phone didn't come to get him.
But did somebody put the cuffs on a naked Oliver Reed? Bend him over the car.
I don't know, bend him over the car, but I
guess
definitely
they wouldn't have to pat him down. They could tell if he was holding anything.
At that point, it was more of, can we contain this person? But
anyways, that's a trivial, fun fact. I read that about the movie, and I thought it was worthy of sharing. I also just like talking about it because we love Cronenberg, we love Canadian content. It is a low-budget horror movie. And, like, Cronenberg didn't have the means to really, have a luscious production here. But he didn't need a luscious production to tell an effective, scary horror story. So, thumbs up on The Brood.
I got one more question.
Go.
I couldn't figure out how the Brood got the snowsuits. Because
they were born, and then somebody. No, that's true.
Then who got them? Like, would it be the doctor? I don't know. That was the one thing.
It's a detail that's not asked. Again, if Cronenberg maybe made it today, they'd be all mutated and naked, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
Maybe we should be grateful for the snowsuits.
Yes. Anyways, we're good. Number 6, and this movie is it's a beautiful slow burn, and I think it's also Philip Coffin's finest hour as well, and I still can't believe it's this low, and it has one of the most chilling endings to any movie, any horror movie, and everyone's so good, from Leonard Nimoy to Brooke Adams. Oh my God, Brooke Adams, by the way. I know. Sorry, I know that sounded bad, ladies, but just, okay.
She's very beautiful.
Yeah, I feel ashamed for saying that. But okay, anyways.
So Invasion of the Body Snatchers?
Invasion of the Body Snatchers. So good. So good. And once again, I can't believe we're not talking about this movie. Jeff Goldblum's really good in it. Leonard Nimoy. Is it Nancy Cartwright?
Yeah.
Who's also an alien.
She's Veronica
Cartwright. Thank you. Such a good horror movie. One of the best horror movies ever made.
Yeah.
Invasions of the Body Snatchers.
Very solid pick.
Better than the original, too.
I agree. In 6th place, Brian De Palma's Carrie.
Okay.
Among the things that Carrie brought to the screen, well, it legitimized horror movies. It's an Oscar-nominated horror movie.
Yeah.
And that fucking jump scare at the end of Carrie,
yeah,
it basically created the punchy jump scare at the end. Like,
yeah,
Sean S. Cunningham admitted that he put that jump scare at the end of Friday the 13th because he wanted a Carrie scare.
Yeah.
It's a thing that started happening after this movie. Like, he got the audience...
And kudos to Brian, that was Brian De Palma, that's not Steve.
Yeah. Script. Like, he got the audience so completely with that scare that, like, he invented a horror cliche.
Yeah.
For good or bad.
Yeah.
Over and above the fact this is the first Stephen King movie to be adapted.
Yeah.
It's one of his first books, but it's a really solid one.
Yeah.
They stayed true to the story, but the character's a little bit different.
Yeah.
And the ending is scaled back.
Yeah.
But it's an upsetting movie. It's a tragic horror film. The cast is incredible.
Yeah.
And it's as incredible as the cast is. The star of the movie is Brian De Palma.
Yeah.
The directing is amazing.
Yep.
So I think Carrie is a very important horror movie.
No, I agree with you. Like it was hard to put Carrie down all the way for me, but I just had to add some movies. Yeah.
Top 5 time, brother.
Okay. I really do think it's George Romero's finest movie. I really do. I love me this movie. And it never gets boring, and that's George A. Romero's Dawn of the Dead. I can't believe it's number 5. I just like that. That's where I'm like, really, Lee?
It gets
really.
Tough. It gets really.
Dawn of the Dead is number
tough.
5, but it's just like, like you can't see this at home, but I am like, for the people listening, I'm having a cinematic erection right now. All right.
So you like Dawn of the Dead?
Yeah.
Well, get ready to be mad. In 5th position for Larry, John Carpenter's Halloween. That ain't easy. That's not an easy call to make, but that's the call I'm making.
See, right now, I'm mind fucking you.
It's an amazing slasher movie. We've reviewed it in the past. I don't know what more I can add to it. It is the prototype, slasher film.
Yeah.
Not that other slasher films haven't happened before or since it, but Halloween is the measure to which we measure all slasher films.
Yeah.
And there's a reason for that. Michael Myers is a scary image, and Carpenter directed the hell out of it. So it's deserves to be in the top 5.
Yeah.
I found the top 5 a crucible. I can't believe my top 5. I'm mad at myself for my top 5.
Okay, well, I know it hurts.
Where we are.
Yeah.
So all the way in 5th place. Question mark. Halloween?
Yeah.
Question mark.
For those at home, I'm also wearing a t-shirt with the poster on it, just how much I love Halloween.
Yeah.
So I think your friendship's in trouble now that you put it at 5.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Yeah, I knew you'd think that was low, but that's just where it ended up, brother. 4th position, dude.
Number 4, I also have the just utterly terrifying, darkly gorgeous Alien by Ridley Scott. It's one of his classic movies. H.R. Geiger's design is primal and hypnotic and also just gets under your skin.
Yeah.
This is one of the first hardcore female action heroes. It's the start of it with Ripley, and that is Alien.
Yeah.
Alien's a terrifying, terrifying movie. The idea about this creature that impregnates you and then bursts out of your chest, it's just awful.
Yeah. And it fulfilled the promise that Ridley Scott had shown with The Duelist, and he was going to take it up another notch for Blade Runner.
It's not a complex movie, but it is a haunted house roller coaster ride.
Well, and in the age before, CGI, the amount of special effects, the amount of practical special effects, and how good that movie still looks today, absolutely deserves to be on this list.
Okay.
In fourth position for me is where I put George Romero's Dawn of the Dead, and that also fucking hurts to put it that low. But it basically takes the themes and ideas of Night of the Living Dead, takes them out of a farmhouse and puts it in a shopping mall. And every part of the movie gets bigger to that same degree. The amount of zombies we see, the amount of violence we see, the social satire we see, but it's put in this really delicious, disarming, ultra-violent package. And you don't even realize how smart it is. It's one of these movies that you can age into. When I first watched Dawn of the Dead, it was all about the spatter, right? And the more you grow up with it, the more you realize that it actually is a movie with lots to say.
Oh yeah, no, it's a very intelligent movie. There are university classes that teach this movie.
So
I get it. Like
once
I said,
again,
I
in
can't believe.
fourth position,
I know.
question mark,
I know.
Dawn of
I
the
know.
Dead,
I know.
question mark.
I know. Okay.
In third position, brother.
Okay, see, this is where once again I'm going to scowl at you. But it is, and we have talked about this. We shouldn't talk way too much anymore about it. But that is John Carpenter's classic movie, Halloween.
Right.
This movie, every time I see it, and even I know what's going to happen, still terrifying.
Right.
Master of mood, John Carpenter, Halloween.
Fair enough. All right, you ready to be angry? Third position.
Ready?
Is a tie.
Okay.
2 sci-fi horror films.
Okay.
Do not ask me to choose between them.
Okay.
Ridley Scott's Alien.
Okay.
And Philip Kaufman's Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Yeah.
They're both sci-fi horror movies.
Yeah.
But aside from being sci-fi horror movies, they're about as different as they can be, right?
Yeah.
Alien is this monster movie in space jumping out of the shadows.
Okay.
It has the scene where the guy who knows there's a monster on the ship walks into a large dark room calling out for a cat, right? It's a cliche that you don't even clock at all because it's executed perfectly.
I know.
Perfectly. The Invasion of the Body Snatchers sort of plays in the same ballpark as The Wicker Man as far as this unraveling conspiracy becoming, first it's just about you, then it's about everybody, then it's everybody against you type of vibe.
Yeah, it's just, there's something really terrifying about, are you human or not? And how do I know?
I did an episode of Rank and Review where both Alien and Invasion of the Body Snatchers were on the list, and in the end I put Invasion on top, but it was fucking brutal.
I know.
And so I come to this 70s list and I'm asked to make this same decision again.
Okay.
And you can call it a cop-out, but it's the 2 sci-fi movies on the list. They're sharing third place.
Okay. Number 2, and I can't believe this film is number 2. It gave me pause because when we first decided to do this show, right away I had 1, 2 right off the bat. That was not going to change, but as time wore on, I went, I don't know. This movie, I think it's the smarter movie than number 1 is. I think it's the scarier movie now. It's not dull and boring. And that's William Friedkin's The Exorcist.
I feel you.
This movie is to this day still terrifying. I still remember the first time seeing this movie. I don't know if it's the better acted. I think the script, the story is more terrifying. I don't know. It's just it's hard putting this film number 2.
Yeah.
And once again I can't believe we're not talking about this. This movie, it's such an adult movie. The Exorcist. Yeah. William Friedkin's The Exorcist is a terrifying, terrifying movie.
I feel you completely. And I don't disagree with you that Jaws deserves to be at the top of the list of 70s horror movies. Yeah. But here's why I put Jaws in number 2.
You fuck off. Fuck off.
I was right there with you in saying, look, I was 100% with you when we said we're doing the 70s. Okay, well, number 1 is Jaws, right? Number 1 is just Jaws. It's like my favorite movie ever made, right? Like, I fucking love Jaws. But we're talking about horror movies. And if I'm honest, even with my shark thing, of which of those 2 movies I think is more frightening, I think that The Exorcist is a more frightening movie. I might like Jaws more than The Exorcist, like on the list of favorite movies.
Yeah.
But of horror movies, I might have to give the edge to The Exorcist. Well, I did give the edge to The Exorcist.
The Kintner boy sequence is so terrifying.
There's a lot of scary stuff in Jaws, but it turns out into an adventure movie.
It's still terrifying.
It's got a shark that eats people, and it's fucking amazingly like it was a crucible, but like just The Exorcist is epic. It's epic.
I'm not denying this. I'm not denying this. I think it's the more adult movie.
Yeah.
That USS Indianapolis speech is classic. It's canon.
Yeah.
And it's still terrifying.
And, you know, I think that the dude rolling down the stairs at the end of The Exorcist is classic.
Yeah.
I think that, you know, that scene where the mother goes up into the attic to hear noises and the torch explodes and all the business with Captain Howdy and just the corruption of that little girl and how the transformation. Yeah. It like I could see Cronenberg being jealous of that movie. It's like watching Exorcist as a young man saying that was the movie I was supposed to make. God damn it.
Well, I mean, I gave Pause many time and it did become number one at some point. Like it's not that I don't understand.
Calling Jaws the second greatest horror movie of the 70s is not really insulting.
No,
right?
I guess also that Jaws was the first movie that I had nightmares for 3 nights in a row after seeing it. Like the Kintner boy broke my mind.
And I agree because I was the age of that kid when I saw that for the first time. Yeah. And it was one of the first times I'd seen a kid die in a movie.
I know.
But like, I remember I was so young, I was playing with action figures. Yeah. And I was laying in a tiny space between the couch and the wall. Yeah. My dad was sitting on the couch and he was watching The Exorcist. Yeah. And I was just listening to it. Yeah. And that gave me nightmares. Yeah. Just knowing that voice was supposed to be coming out of a little girl. Yeah. Fucked my shit up. Right? Yeah. And when I finally, you know, watched the movie and got the full context of it and then grew up to an adult and was able to like really appreciate the filmmaking in it. Yeah. Again, and Jaws is a magical film as well. Yeah. Dude, like, it's a similar crucible I was talking about with Invasion of the Body Snatchers and Alien, in that they're both horror movies, but they're both incredibly different, what they're bringing you. Yeah. But they both bring it to you perfectly.
I know. I had the best experience watching The Exorcist for the first time. I was 14 years old, and we were living in London, Ontario on sabbatical. My mom was on sabbatical. And we had a room where the whole room was just a window, like both the walls, the ceiling, well, the floor was like wood, but everything else was glass. And I started it, you know, one night, and then just as the stuff with the actual possession was really starting with Regan, a huge thunderstorm hit, and it was night. So the rest of this movie, which is just unbelievably terrifying, I had this thunderstorm to give this perfect aesthetic to it. Yeah. So I get it. I need time to adjust from that shock.
I surprised myself because I think we had that conversation when we were saying we're making the list. Like, well, Jaws is number 1, right? Yeah. Right? Yeah. But then you get all these other... Then you talk about The Exorcist and Alien and Dawn of the Dead and fucking Halloween. Yeah. Like, how do you... What is it? Yeah. So, in a way, I figured you were a lock, maybe, for Jaws number 1, 2. Maybe that's why I felt safe, like, making that switch. Yeah. It seems wrong, I know, but that's how I feel.
Long story short, there are way too many good horror films on this list. It was an embarrassment of riches.
I want to someday re-review The Exorcist because I'm not happy with my review of The Exorcist. Terry Schroll talks shit about that movie, and I was so surprised that he was talking shit about it. I felt I didn't adequately defend it. Yeah. So today's the day I'm saying The Exorcist is one of the greatest, if not the greatest horror movie of the 1970s. Fair enough.
It's the night of the senior prom. The Bates High School gym is alive with excitement. Everybody is there, even Carrie White. The girl no one likes.
We're all sorry about this incident, Cassie.
It's Carrie!
And everyone makes fun of her.
Carrie!
The girl who lives in that creepy house with her crazy mother.
Help the sinning woman see the sin of her days and ways. Show her
that if she had remained sinless, the curse of blood would never have come on her.
The girl with the strange power.
If I concentrate hard enough, I can move things.
But tonight, no one will laugh at Carrie.
If you don't have a date for the prom next Friday, would you like to go with me?
She's with the best-looking boy in the senior class.
He's trying to trick me again.
She'll be voted queen of the prom.
You know, I can make sure that you don't hurt Carrie White anymore.
For Carrie, it will be a dream come true. For everyone else, it will be a nightmare. Carrie. A new film by Brian De Palma. Based on the chilling bestseller. Starring Sissy Spacek, Piper Laurie, and introducing John Travolta in his first motion picture role. If you have a taste for terror, you have a date with Carrie.
So the work of Carrie is significant on many reasons. I mean, it's the first published work of Stephen King, and it's been remade several times. There was a very lackluster sequel to it. There's been a musical made about it. People seem to have connected to this story of this high school outsider, Carrie White, who has got a pretty abusive, toxic relationship with her religious zealot of a mother. They live alone in this house with their crazy religious fervor, and as a result, they're isolated from the rest of the community. She finds it really hard to socialize at school. She's, I think, clearly traumatized and broken by her upbringing and has her own psychological issues to bear. But what really sort of starts the ball rolling is she gets her period for the first time. And not only is that a traumatic event for her just in of itself, as it must be, it happens publicly in a girl's locker room. And she is humiliated and terrified and just absolutely victimized by the girls in there. Just it's a horrifying scene in the book. And De Palma does everything he can to do it justice in the movie.
Oh, he's masterful in with that opening shot. That the beginning of this movie. I mean, it's a classic movie, but one of the things that makes it work so well, and then that's both the work by the cinematography by Mario Tosi and the music by Piano Donaggio. I'm sure I'm saying that incorrectly. It starts off almost as this sort of, soft porn, kind of look aesthetic to it, and it is fulfilling that sort of pubescent teenage fantasy of, oh, you get to see the girls,
but then it goes to a place very ugly,
and it's just bang.
I also think, and I've talked about it before, that slow motion pan through a girl's locker room. There's that, like, the little teenage boy looking
it's
through
very
a
voyeuristic
thing, right?
Yeah.
But it establishes early in the movie, if we're going to show you this over the fucking opening credits, practically, where else are we going to go? It takes you off your guard, right? It's
but it's just, I'm giving chops to the powers of the seduction of this movie and how it's presented.
But I'm going to push the plot a little bit here. She has her period. They're really brutal to her, but this is a catalyst not only just for her bullying going up another level, but her becoming a woman, as it were, opens up this inherent psychic ability, this sin, as her mother would call it. And I think that, like, her mother had winks of it in herself,
possibly,
but that she feared for that in her daughter in a way. Though she feared her daughter becoming a woman, but she also feared her daughter inheriting this shining or this psychic gift or whatever you want to call it.
Are we coming out and saying that this is the shine?
Well, I think that Stephen King's books are all connected in all of the world, and I think that Carrie White has a similar gift that Danny Torrance has in The Shining. It's not referred to as The Shining here, but psychic people happen a lot in Stephen King's books. The interesting thing is that, like I said, this outsider character narrative. We want to see her sort of blossom, flower, and do well with her peers, and sort of get some comeuppance with the bullies. And the film does that service, but it also maintains this tragic trajectory. The main difference between Carrie White in the film and Carrie White in the book she's kind of a bigger girl. And in the film, they kind of go the other way, where she's like skinny as a rail, and they're kind of the plain Jane. In both cases, her clothes are homemade, and she's kind of frumpy. And because it's the way she's raised, she comes off as fairly unequivocal, especially when it comes off to people doing things that are improper. Yeah. She comes off as snotty. Yeah. In the movie, she comes off as less snotty and more just like ignorant. Like just the fact that she doesn't understand what her period is when it happens to her. Yeah. That infuriates people. Like they just don't understand how that could happen. But it happened. Yeah. So what we have is a tale of revenge and a tale of an outsider, and those things have always been classically successful works in literature. But what is it, do you think, that makes Carrie special? Like, I ranked it higher in the list of 70s movies than you did, but I think it is one of the most important horror movies of the 70s.
It is one of the most important horror movies of the 70s. You have to understand it was hard putting Carrie down there, but there was just other things I wanted to talk about that I think ranked higher. But I think one of the reasons why it is considered a classic horror movie is that one of the things that I don't know if it's maybe original, but the monster itself is not the villain. She is very much the tragic person. I don't know about you, but when she finally hits that part where it's a homicide, where she turns homicidal, and I would even argue at that point, can't even control her power to some
Travis Bickle rage.
Yeah.
Right?
But I don't know. I found myself cheering for her getting revenge on the community that had really betrayed her. Because whether you believe it or not, what Carrie sees, obviously there's a couple of people laughing for the trick was happened. She sees everybody laughing. Yeah. Not everybody's laughing. In fact, about half the room was nakedly horrified. Yeah. But in her head, it's confirmation of her mother saying they're all gonna laugh at you. Yeah. And the enough people are laughing that's all she sees, that's all she hears. And to take the words out of De Palma's mouth, everyone is guilty, everyone must die. Yeah. Yeah. Like when she finally succumbs in the story, I feel nothing but tragic loss. Like I don't hate this person at all. She is put through so much tragedy and trauma, that's the word, that when she finally does break and her monstrous side is exposed, not once do I judge her. And I think that's something that, and it rings so true, and like you could tell this story today. It is so authentic. In fact, this story still exists to this day in real life. People
get bullied to death or bullied to crazy,
and then kill themselves.
Yeah.
It's universal, I think, is what I'm trying to get at. This story, and that's the sign of a classic movie.
There's something in us that wants to see the underdog come up and spank these people.
Yeah.
But I think to the movie and the book's credit, when she does spank these people, it gets ugly. Yeah. Now, in typical Stephen King fashion, and here's some spoilers for the book, as well as we'll get to the spoilers of the movie. Yeah. In the book, she destroys a good portion of the town.
Yeah, the remake explores that more.
It becomes more of like a free-for-all, like it burned down everything. Everything has gone wrong, and she gets to that point of just naked rage. Yeah. And then, so I don't like that leaning towards Stephen King where he likes to end things with a big bang. Yeah. But what De Palma did, he kept it contained to the high school. Yeah. But he showed both the guilty and the innocent being punished. Yeah. Most memorably, what's the name of the teacher? I'm having Mrs. Snell. Yeah. She's the one who disciplines all the girls who are so fucking evil to her in the opening scene. Yeah. And she's the one who's really genuinely nice to Carrie. Yeah. And she's the one who actually connects and tries to help Carrie. Yeah. And she is given the worst death of the movie.
Well, I wouldn't say the worst death, but it's a pretty brutal one.
She's snapped in half. Again, the documentary on the disc, she said De Palma gave her the direction, I want you to squirm like a bug on a pin. Yeah. Yeah. So that's why I always equate it with the worst death. Yeah. And I think that was smart. It's scaled down. The high school people were guilty. Everybody there, whether they were guilty or not, she found them all guilty. Yeah. And She looks at Mrs. Snell. She sees who it is.
Yeah.
She sees her say, don't do it, don't do it. She does it, and she watches her writhe as she dies.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And she didn't deserve that.
Yeah.
And on some far distant plane,
Yeah.
Carrie even knows it.
Yeah.
But she does it, and she enjoys doing it.
Yeah.
Because she's completely captured by her vengeance.
Yeah.
She's made into a monster both by her mother and these bullies.
Yeah.
We haven't really talked about John Travolta and Nancy Allen.
Yeah, because they are despicable, dysfunctional human beings who lead the catalyst into breaking Carrie. Like, really, Nancy Allen's character has no redeeming qualities whatsoever. Travolta's character is sort of like a dumb...
Here's where we fall back on something I've said recently. Travolta's not good at playing villains. In the screenplay and in the book, like, he's one of these greaser Stephen King villains, and he's an asshole, and he slaps Chris around.
Yeah.
Travolta couldn't do it. He wasn't even, like, willing to really physically slap her. So I think De Palma, instead of fighting Travolta on this, just let Chris be the main villain. She was in the driver's seat at all time.
Yeah.
He probably wouldn't be this much of a villain, but
Yeah.
Chris steers him that way.
Oh, yeah.
There's a difference between bullying a girl and literally killing a pig to drain it of blood, to pour a bucket of blood on this girl's head.
Yeah.
To, like, do this unbelievably meticulous, like, rig the election of prom queen so that Carrie wins, so that at the peak of her happiness she can just smack her down again publicly. It is so fucking evil. But it's one of the weird cases where I'm not distracted by the Stephen King villain, because I believe a teenage girl is capable of fucking anything.
All right, Larry, do tell. Okay.
Well, no, hell hath no fury.
Yeah,
right? Chris was denied her prom, and she was made a villain, and she was publicly shamed and slapped by a teacher in front of all of her peers.
Yeah,
so Carrie White had to pay.
Yeah,
and it consumed her life. This revenge, right?
Yeah,
but we want to see a really brutal death for Chris. But that's not who gets the brutal death. It's Mrs. Snell. Because vigilante justice, however satisfying, is wrong.
No, I understand. I understand what you're getting at here. One thing I do want to talk about the final scene, because that final attack at the school, it's iconic. But how it's presented, some critics reading up on the reviews didn't like the split screen. I think it is so good. It works so well, and it covers a lot more of the action in doing so, where it isn't distracting to me. I think that how that's framed, that whole idea of it,
I say
that's
yes
De Palma
no.
right there.
Yes and no. I mean, De Palma has always been pretty experimental with that.
Yeah.
When the split screen has one side on Carrie, and the other side on what her mind is making happen, I'm on board.
Yeah.
But when the split screen is just two pieces of different chaos, and you have to pick your vision, you can't watch both at once. Then, more so than even the fact that it is undeniably a split screen, it seems to be screaming split screen, which takes you out of the movie just for a second.
I disagree, but okay.
But like I say, there are moments where I think it's effective, and there's moments where it takes me out of it. But it certainly doesn't sink the ship, because like I say, I think it's a classic horror movie. We should talk about Piper Laurie.
Woo!
Both she and Sissy Spacek were nominated for Oscars.
Rightfully so.
And I like how seriously the Oscars took this movie.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. Piper Laurie's performance comes close to high camp to me. Like, it's a good performance. I wouldn't take away any awards from her, but like, she plays it huge.
Yep.
And another major change from the book. Again, spoiler for anyone who wants to read the book.
Yeah, she dies differently.
She dies very differently in the book. Like, Carrie looks her in the eye, and as they're having a conversation, she stops her heart.
Yeah.
And like they're basically like soul staring at each other as she puts out her mom's light. It's the most personal kill as you read it.
Yeah.
But that would be a really hard thing to translate on screen. So
possible, but
De Palma sort of puts this
whole bunch
de facto crucifixion, right?
Yeah.
She gets these kitchen implements pin her up to the wall in a Jesus pose, and she's getting stabbed again and again and again.
And I think that was a good choice.
But what I love about it is the Piper Laurie's take on her death scene is that she loves it. Watch it again, and as each one of those things are stabbing her, she's smiling, and almost like it's almost orgasmic the
yeah.
way she's like like she's so grateful for her pain ending,
Yeah.
like that she's welcoming each one of these hits.
Fair enough.
And
I
it
remember
is
thinking
fucked.
this too.
It's fucked.
Yeah, you know that she thought she was making a black comedy when she was making this movie. I think that's one of the brilliant things about it is that she literally thought
That's why she was playing it so big, I bet. Right?
Yeah. She thought she was making a black comedy. And
well, she's a Stephen King villain, and I say this as a Stephen King fan. Like, he paints in black and white, and Carrie White's mom, Margaret White, is fucking bad.
Yeah.
She's a terrible mother and a terrible person.
Yeah.
And so, like, I can see that. You'd read the lines, and it was like she's being raised by Emperor Palpatine. It's just like she's nothing about her is nice or warm, right?
Yeah.
And yet Carrie still loves her mama.
I know, mama.
The religious repression angle, I think, is really interesting too. The fact that she's repeatedly locked in a closet and forced to look at this spooky Jesus nightlight and pray to it for hours, perhaps days at a time.
And that's partly what Carrie's, at least the fear from it, is the fear of this fascist organized religion, or at least taken to a pathology that's pretty unhealthy.
The details, the scratches that are low on the door.
Yeah,
she's a teenager now, but at some point she was a little girl scratching and screaming to get out of that fucking room.
Yeah, which brings back to my whole argument that Carrie is very much a tragic person and not a monster.
She did bad
things. Not a villain.
She did some really evil things, but she was made into this monster.
Yeah, so that's why I can't.
Her mom and Susan and what happened to her in that shower room.
Yeah, I think this I don't know, maybe argue that where I'm wrong, but this is probably De Palma's most emotionally intelligent story, because De Palma's I don't think is a deep thinker when it comes to a lot of his stories. Somewhat, I mean.
He likes technical filmmaking. For me, like, he read the script and he saw that prom sequence, and he saw that he could fucking shoot the hell out of that.
Yeah.
And he does.
Yeah.
But it was more that I can make a hell of a sequence out of that than I really, believe in the story or connect.
It's just that Carrie White's character is so authentic and once again relatable, like, and just the journey that she goes on. You believe every beat of it. Yeah. Unquestionably,
the outsider getting their revenge is always, it's like a horror version of Rudy. Carrie has been, her entire life has been fucked around, and like she's just had such a bad beat forever. Yeah, and things finally start to go good for her, and then it's all taken away. Yeah, and she cannot deal with it.
But in the worst way too. Like that would break anyone.
Oh yeah, yeah. She's bullied to death.
Yeah.
So, like, I absolutely feel sympathy for Carrie White, but I like that they kept the horror.
Yeah. No. Like I'm not denying that. Like, what happens is horrific. Yeah. I guess I just can't agree that. Well, I mean, she does turn and murder people. Yeah, you can't deny that. Yeah. But I just.
She's in the
deep down inside, like you totally am like you go girl. I don't know. Yeah.
And for me, it's that scene where she goes home and she gets in the bathtub and she wants only to be comforted by her mom. Yeah. Her mom has been proven right. She's lost. She's surrendered at this point. I will be the most dutiful daughter you ever want me to be because I never, can deal with this outside world again. And instead of being embraced by her mom, she's fucking stabbed by her mom.
I know.
It's just. There's nothing for Carrie but violence. Like, there's nothing.
Yeah.
Travis Bickle, at least, I think, given the right person, the right opportunity, could choose to at least attempt to steer his life around. Yeah. Carrie's trajectory is so forced on her that it's tragic and horrifying.
Yeah, we should talk about William Catt very quickly as well. Do you think the choices they made, it was, I think, made in good intentions, was the, right choice for them to go on that date? I mean, clearly he's
not in on the conspiracy. He doesn't know that this bucket of blood is. And Sue Snell, the Amy Irvin character, genuinely feels horrible for her participation in the bathroom ridicule. And so she thinks she deserves to miss prom. And she thinks Carrie deserves to have this romantic night. Yeah. So she convinces her boyfriend to take Carrie out. That's not, and he's being legitimately nice to her. Now, are they going to fall in love and have a relationship? No. This is a gesture.
Yeah.
But it's a very friendly gesture.
Yeah.
And, it would have been a nice night for Carrie that she would remember forever, and it would maybe help socialize her a little bit. So the next time she went out, the world would be a little less scary.
Yeah.
Alas, none of that was to be.
Yeah, and it kills him.
But he's furious when it happens.
Yeah.
And, he gets electrocuted on the stage in the book. I think the concussion, I think it's implied that he's killed by the dropping of the pail in the movie.
Yeah.
But in the book, he's laying on the stage when one of the chords light up.
Okay.
And he's
but that sort of that's what sends Carrie finally over the edge.
Yeah.
So, anyways, William Katt's really good. Amy Irving is really good. Of course, you've already talked about it with that classic, iconic. This is the movie that, I don't know if it started it, but definitely made it famous. That whole last gotcha ending that has been done to death and now parodied and mentioned and made fun of by, well, the Scream films for sure. But
and just talk about all the peaks and valleys, successes and lack thereof for Stephen King adaptations.
Yeah.
He came out of the gate with Carrie. It was a good book, and it's a great movie.
Okay, well, I'm going to come back at you. Why do you think Carrie is, a classic horror film?
Well, like I've said, the relatable templates of the outsider getting revenge, it's proved in many genres, in comedies and romances and in dramas, anything.
Yeah.
People connect to that.
Yeah.
So there's that.
Yeah.
And I think just the historic union of these two powerful things, they merged, right?
Yeah.
Brian De Palma met Stephen King halfway in a way Kubrick didn't with The Shining.
Yeah.
Kubrick turned The Shining into a Stanley Kubrick joint more than it was a Stephen King story.
Yeah.
De Palma managed to tell the story and show us what an amazing filmmaker he was.
Yeah. How good is Piper or Sissy Spacek in this movie? Because we really haven't talked a lot about her. We've talked about her character.
She's the heart and soul of the movie.
Yeah.
Like she's the emotional barometer of the movie.
Yeah.
Without her, nothing works.
Yeah. She's so good. She gives off such a bare, emotionally raw performance. You don't doubt once that this girl is just very shy and sheltered and easily manipulated.
Yeah.
And I think it's hard to project that.
Yeah.
And you believe every element of that. So, Sissy Spacek. She didn't win for this, but she went for...
Was it Badlands?
Places in the Heart. I think. One question I wanted to ask you is, De Palma, one of the criticisms about De Palma throughout his years that he's been accused of orchestrating, a well laid out misogyny. That was labeled pretty hardcore during Dress to Kill, obviously labeled here, and Body Double. Do you think that he is a misogynist filmmaker?
My knee-jerk reaction is no. I think that
he has admitted he loves photographing women.
Well, I mean, I don't think we should be ashamed of enjoying the female form.
No.
But they're talking about mainly with the violence towards women. Okay,
he's very good at women suffering.
In this case, it's based off of a Stephen King book, and all the female suffering came with the book.
Yeah.
To not include it would be not to do justice to the story.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, he seems to come back to dangerous women doing dangerous things again and again.
Mm-hmm.
And he likes the femme fatales. He made a movie called Femme Fatales. But is that sexist? I don't know. I don't know if I'm willing to make that argument.
Okay.
I stand by my opinion that I think he doesn't look at story when he reads scripts. He looks at sequences.
Yeah.
He reads that, I guess it was originally a train station shootout in The Untouchables. It turned into the stairway shootout, but he reads the shootout in the subway station at Carlito's Way, and he's like, yeah, I can shoot the shit out of that. He reads the sequence about the prom and Carrie, and he sees how he can really tell that story in a really impressive visual way. I think that he's much more a technical workman filmmaker than he is emotional about it, right?
Yeah.
There's a huge elaborate sequence that leads up to a woman's throat being slashed in Dress to Kill. But it's not about the woman's throat being slashed. It's about the elaborate sequence that gets us there, for me. The people that are obsessed with the violence are people that are predisposed to be obsessed with the violence. I do believe that there are people, Lars von Trier is definitely fucking one of them, that gets off on women suffering. I don't think that that's the case with De Palma. I think De Palma's a filmmaker. I think it's less about what the story is saying or what the feelings of the characters are than how he's going to present this tale to you technically.
I will say this though. I mean, we can leave this argument if you want. He's very good at also photographing women suffering. He's very good at it. It's one of his calling cards. I'm not saying
Did he write all the screenplays for these movies? I don't even know. I'm honestly asking.
No. Yeah, I know he didn't write Carrie. Or did he co-write it?
According to the Lauren D. Cohen is credited with the screenplay here.
Yeah,
Lawrence D. Cohen.
Yeah, I didn't think he did.
Like the source material is the source material. He does a lot of genre thriller horror movies, and women tend to die badly in those movies. I mean, you can try and crucify the entire genre if you want.
No, I'm not going to do that either. I was one of those sort of just plopping it in there. One of those questions since we're talking about Carrie, and there's a lot of female suffering in this story. It was just one of the things that sort of he does it quite well.
Carrie's the classic example of this. You know, people can go on and on about, there's a bunch of naked teenage girls and there's a bunch of violence towards teenage girls.
Yeah.
Who are the most powerful characters in this movie? Teenage girls, right? Mm-hmm. This movie passes the Bechdel test, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's about women being terrible to each other, but it's about strong women. And yes, there's some violence to it, but it's a horror movie. Fucking suck it up.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Final thoughts. Lee Beckmann and Larry Parsons have ranked our top 25 horror movies of the 70s. Mm-hmm. And we've talked about 5 interesting ones and 1 not so interesting one.
Yeah.
But what's your takeaway from all of this? Was this a worthy use of your time? When you originally wanted to do it, you were like, let's do it right away. And I made you wait like 6 or 8 months so that I could watch a shit ton of 70s movies.
Yeah.
Was it worth it?
Of course it was. You had to ask that. That's a rhetorical question. It was totally worth it. It was great seeing, a lot of great cinema. I mean, all of them not so, not all of them didn't hit them out of the park, but there was something about this decade that was just so strong. And I loved the similarities I saw, was obviously this focus on a dreamlike aesthetic. Psychics and telekinesis were, definitely very interesting and examined.
The psychological stuff.
Subject,
Yeah, there's a lot of psychological depth going on in the 70s in a way like that. We got past sort of the surface entertainment of a lot of the 60s, musical and sort of spectacle kind of films.
Yeah.
And in the 70s they rolled up their sleeves and some filmmaking started happening and some real character work started happening. And the acting, which had been getting increasingly more realistic, has sort of became gritty and authentic. And also all 70s films benefited from this windfall, but it was a strong decade for horror movies. Like, again, the top 5.
Mm-hmm.
Top 5 was brutal to try and make sense out of.
Yeah.
Like, how do I put these movies in any kind of order?
Yeah.
In a way, like the 80s one was a little bit easier to sort for me. There were more movies that I was familiar with, but there were more that were easier to dismiss for that level.
Yeah.
I've gotten more of an appreciation for giallo films, even though they'll never be my favorite thing.
Giallo.
They'll never be my favorite thing, but I'm starting to adjust to the temperature of the waters.
Yeah.
A lot of filmmakers that we still watch and are still revered today, we talked about in this list. Your Martin Scorsese's, your Brian De Palma's, to your lesser extent, your David Lynch, definitely Steven Spielberg, still very valid. Mm-hmm. And these were them in their formative years, and they came out swinging.
Yeah. I also like, once again, Scorsese. I already mentioned this, but Scorsese talked about how these films at this time were really just an extension of dreams, and that quality. With even the aesthetic, how a lot of these movies look, they do feel almost like there's a very much separation between you, the viewer, and the story. There's a wall that's nice there, and you experience that a lot. I mean, it's still very hypnotic, and you still kind of suck into it, but there is the fact that this is a kind of extension of us, but there's still that wall. Yeah. That's one way I could sort of only really sort of explain it. So there's it's nice to see that as well.
And to repeat myself, there are the indie sensibilities of filmmaking being put into big budget movies.
Yeah, I like the fact that a lot of films were literally unleashed on their content, and also some of the things that made the films naughty.
The age of here's a bag of money, go make your movie is gone. If anyone's going to give you millions of dollars to make a movie, they're going to want a creative hand. Yeah. Or an iron in the fire. And too many irons in the fire will put it out, will kill your movie, right? Yeah. Like this time of why are we doing this super slow close-up shot on the hubcap of the taxi car? Why are we doing that, Martin? We're doing that because it feels right. Yeah. Well, don't you traditionally mount the camera centered in the middle of the windshield instead of way off in the prow of the hood of the cab? Why? That's not standard. Why are we doing that? Because it's right. Yeah. Because that's what it feels right to tell this story, right? Yeah. The rule books got discarded for a while. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's also very guitar-y in that sort of way. I love the fact that the camera is off center in a good portion of Taxi Driver. It really doesn't focus a lot on the center. It does sort of pan almost in a diagonal way or parallel way sometimes to the actor, which gives off this sort of unhinged, everything's not centered feel to that, and that's also done quite a bit in a lot of these films. Especially, definitely Argento would be one. Well, and you can see I'm more impressed by uses of camera in the 70s too, because they don't have all the toys. I miss a good long shot, and there's a great one in Carrie. Long shots, slow pans, slow reveals. Yeah. Movies that aren't afraid to ask their audience to engage and meet them halfway. Yeah. So many movies nowadays, even movies I like the Marvel Universe, I think is completely fine and fun to watch. Yeah. But you are spoon-fed. They make sure that nobody's lost at any point, right? Just uncomplicated movie watching. Yeah. Just keep you filling your face with popcorn. Yeah. Sometimes I like that, but sometimes I want a meal. I want something that will stimulate me, that will fire things off in other corners of my brain, other than fire good. I like pretty lights, I like fireworks, but I also like something that will maybe make me think. Yeah. And that's that extra layer that gives so many 70s movies their edge, it's another Dog Day Afternoon may be another bank robbery movie, but it's unlike any bank robbery movie you've ever seen. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And to this day, Carrie's been remade a couple of times now, but the original Carrie just is dead on. It feels right. Yeah. Yeah. Even though they changed the book, the most recent version of Carrie was much more authentic to the book, but just didn't quite land. Yeah, I know. The changes that De Palma made, I think, totally enhanced that story for the film. Yeah, no, I agree in that as well. There was a lot of risk taking, and that was more successful than it did fail. Even Phantasm, I think, is an example of that, because that's a crazy story. It's a mishmash of a couple of genres, but that story could only ever be made in the 70s. I miss movies willing to take risks. This is totally jumping the shark because it has nothing to do with the 70s. But I think the other day we were talking about this absurd comedy, Dodgeball the movie. Yeah. I think that the original conceit of that movie would have been executed well in the 70s. Yeah. In this Dodgeball, which is a ridiculous, amusing comedy about the sport of dodgeball, right? Yeah. Was originally, as scripted, going to set us all up for the big game to save the Joe Schmo Jim. Yeah. But they lose. Yeah. They lose hard, and they smash cut to credits, and the joke was going to be on the audience, right? Yeah. Well, they went ahead and made Dodgeball, but they didn't have the guts to pull the trigger on that ending. Yeah. If it was made in 77, they would have pulled the trigger on that ending, whether it was good for the film or not. Yeah. And that's why the 70s is going to be a more interesting decade. Yeah. Yeah. Because it all comes back to Dodgeball. Of course. thank you for talking so much 70s
Yeah.
with me.
Yeah.
Current champion.
I still am.
Rank and Review champion.
I'm surprised.
Mr. Lee Beckmann.
I'm surprised by that. I figured.
Lee Beckmann will return again. We're going to be talking about intellectually stimulating cinema.
Important cinema.
Important
You
cinema.
named it.
Yes. Cinema of importance. So let's all look forward to that.
You.
And so our epic two-part discussion of 70s horror comes to an end. But just because our discussion comes to an end doesn't mean that your discussion has to. You can send feedback to ranknreview@gmail.com. That's ranknreview@gmail.com. Please tell me what you think. Tell me what movies I missed. Tell me what you would rank your 70s horror movies. And let me know the gaps that I missed. Should I talk about the Hammer horror movies sometime? Any glaring omissions? This is the time to tell me. Thank you so much for listening to this two-part epic adventure into the 1970s horror. And as always, your host and random Canadian Larry Parsons says thank you. I love you guys for listening, and please spread the word to those other movie nerds in your life. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another action-packed episode of Rank and Review.
Thank you.